Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hi. People are all connecting in, which is lovely. Morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all this morning, and still feels a shame that we can't do this face to face, but I think we're all getting used to it now. But fingers crossed, over the coming months, we'll actually be able to have these, some of these events face to face. That's our plan anyway. But thank you ever so much for joining us this Thursday morning, which I don't know where you all are, but it feels very muggy and close here. We were having a conversation about the weather before we joined on today, but it's lovely to see you all. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start, which I'm sure you're all so used to by now. We are recording the session just so that we've got it available for people that can't attend. So yeah, just wanted to let you know that we are recording today. And also, if you're not speaking, then please pop yourself on mute. I think you've all done that. As I said, I think we're all used to the way of this world now. So yeah, we've got a really full session today, which is great. So my name's Keely Hancock, and I'm Operations Manager at Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce, and it's lovely to see some familiar faces. I've met some of you I know very well, and some of you are new to me, so it's lovely to see you all this morning. And welcome you to one of our first 21 in 21 leadership workshops for women in business across Coventry and Warwickshire. We're really lucky today to be joined by some of our mentors and our mentees who are participating in our 21 in 21 programme, as well as many of you that are valued and loyal members of Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce. So we launched our 21 programme back in March with women in business, chief executives, business owners and business leaders signing up to be a mentor, volunteering their time to support our mentees. So our mentees, the next generation of women in business, those aspiring business owners, entrepreneurs, and those that want to climb the career ladder. 21 in 21 is an opportunity to showcase our women in business. We want to use this platform to have events such as today, networking events. We want to broaden our learning, and we want to really be able to facilitate you meeting with fellow women in business. Our workshop this morning is delivered in partnership, excuse me, with our 21 in 21 programme sponsors, West Midland Reserve Forces and Cadets Association. And it's really quite timely that next week is Armed Forces Week, which includes Reserves Day on Wednesday, the 23rd of June. The Chamber is a proud signatory to the Armed Forces Covenant, and we will be honouring those who serve our country throughout next week. Simon from West Midland Reserve Forces and Cadets Association will be joining us later this morning to give a short update on the Armed Forces Covenant. But the main focus of today is on the subject of leadership. What qualities does one need to strengthen to become a good leader? Is there such a thing as a natural born leader? Is there a difference between a good manager and a good leader? How do you step up from a management role to a leader? How do you lead and take people with you towards that common goal and shared vision? What are the differing leadership styles, and how can you vary your style according to the desired outcome? There's a plethora of content, resources, books, journals, podcasts, and many more which investigates these themes, all with varying opinions, examples, evidence, which we can use to support us as women in business. But often the information which resonates the most with us comes from our leaders themselves, how they got to where they are and what they've learned along the way. And that's the stance we're taking today. We're really, really pleased to welcome our headline speaker, Major Samantha Lucas-Floyd. Major Samantha Lucas-Floyd joined the Army in March 2006 as a soldier into the Royal Military Police. She completed her training, earning the rank of Lance Corporal, and was posted to Germany to conduct general police duties. Subsequent postings included Aldershot, Bulford, and the Major Incident Room, where she worked as an indexer using the home system as part of the Iraq Historical Allegations team. Whilst here, she applied for a commission, and after successfully passing the Army Officer Selection Board, she attended the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in January 2012. Following her trade training, she moved back to Germany for a posting and was subsequently deployed on the last tour of Afghanistan. Here she was deployed as the Regimental Administration Officer responsible for tri-service personnel of the Royal 3 Hospital at Camp Bastion. Following a short stint as an operations manager for Mighty, she went back into the Army fold to take a full-time reserve contract as the media officer, and then later a role as Regimental Administration Officer, where she has been since 2018. Major Samantha Lucas-Floyd, welcome to today, and can I hand over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see my slide. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here today to speak to you. I'm not sure how much I can offer necessarily, but I shall do my best. So that's me, Major Lucas-Floyd, and I am currently the Administration Officer at 159 Regiment RLC. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a bit of scope for the presentation. I want it to be quite interactive, so I'm just going to run through a little bit about me, the regiment that I'm working at, look at some strong leadership with a focus on recruitment, so I can give you a feel of how we have used leadership in terms of recruitment and the issues that we faced, looking at the what, the who and the how. Finally, then conclusion, and open it up for questions, as I find that the question and answer sessions are probably the most insightful. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So yeah, there's two photos of me, one on the left when I was a Lance Corporal into the Royal Military Police. I won't go through my background there because we've just gone through it. But the key point here is I started my career as a junior non-commissioned officer, and I've worked my way up, which is great because it gives me an insight as to both sides of the coin. So when I'm leading Lance Corporals, or anyone beneath me, then I have an understanding of what they're thinking and the best levers to use so that I can adapt my leadership style. So that's all I'll say on that. We shall move on to the main presentation. So next slide, please. So I Googled strong leadership, and that's what the definition is. The main points there: encouragement, motivation, inspiring, challenging your team. So taking this definition, I wanted to explore how we as a regiment show some kind of strong leadership, but within the recruitment arena. As I've said there, the encourage, motivate, inspire, I think are the three most important attributes of a leader. But we'll go on, because what I'd like to bring out is leadership is all about adapting to the situation. I don't think there are necessarily any specific qualities that you need to have as a leader. I think it's about using a whole host of different qualities and adapting them to the situation that you're in. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is quite a busy slide, but this is just the what part of the analysis. So in terms of leadership, I think it's really important to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. So in terms of this, it's about recruitment. That's our area of responsibility there with our different squadrons. Feel free to drop us a line if you want to join the reserves as well. You never know. But yeah, a key part of the military is critical thinking. It's the ability to improvise, adapt and overcome, thinking on your feet, which means that whether you have 5 minutes before entering a compound or 5 weeks to work on a recruitment strategy, the analysis is the same, that you're trying to solve a problem effectively, and you're trying to bring a team together for a common goal. So for this example, as I said, I'll use recruitment as the overarching theme. So the what, we're a logistics regiment, we're based in the Midlands, and that slide just shows where we are geographically located. And our main mission is underpinned by ensuring we have motivated and trained soldiers. So as leaders, how do we make this happen within the regiment? If we move on to the next slide, please. So once we've understood what the problem is, and in this situation it is to do with recruitment, then the next one to look at is who. So who do you have under your command or within your organisations that can have an impact on the problem that you are trying to solve? If we assume leadership is delivered by middle managers, for us at junior non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers level, then you can see in that table that we are quite undermanned at those middle manager levels. And so does that have a direct effect on leadership? Is it quantity over quality? These are questions that I can't answer, and it will depend on your organisation and how your hierarchies are. But what we've found is, even though we are gapping these key appointments, it's all about having a shared vision. And so it definitely is quality over quantity. All I wanted to do with this slide was just highlight that you're never going to have the full contingent that you would necessarily want or necessarily like, but it's about adapting, as I said, to the situation. On a side note, as you can see there, our regiment is currently at 15% manned for females. So we're above the Army target of 14%, which we're due to hit by 2030, which is great to see. We have increased it, and there's a whole host of different things that we've done to try and increase female recruitment. But ultimately, females recruit females. So doing things like this, having webinars, seminars, mentor, it opens the network and communication from industries into the military. So I think they're really, really important. So now we've looked at what the situation is. We've looked at who best to solve the situation. You can then go on to the next slide of how. So for us, recruitment, we looked at the problem of how we always increase recruitment or have a direct or a constant flow of soldiers into the regiment. So we looked at the problem, identified who can have the impact, and this is now how we've tried to implement that strategy. And the photos there are just pictures of different things that we do. A lot of this is post-COVID, so we've got a lot of adventure training there, and it's all about the good parts of the training that we do. And then on the right, we've got some trade training and very much how we adapted to the situation of COVID. So COVID obviously hit. We would do a lot of our training in person at our squadron locations, but with COVID and the national lockdown, we then had to think about how we not only continue with recruitment, but also ensure that the retention of the soldiers that we do have remained extant, because what we didn't want is to just completely turn off all training and lose a whole load of good soldiers that we had. So if we go on to the next slide. So yeah, how we did this then, we looked at the changing nature of how we were doing the business, and as per any project management, it was the ability to constantly review the situation. So some of the constraints that we've had over or some of the challenges we've had over the last few months and years can come all the way from strategic level direction, you know, the Army 2020, could be changes to recruitment strategies, changes to personnel. But for this one, I'm just going to focus on the COVID and the environment, because I think that's something that we're all quite au fait with now. And you can see how businesses have either done really well with overcoming the adversities they faced with COVID, or they haven't. So for us, we looked at continuing delivering everything that we would do face to face, but in an IT environment. And all this slide is trying to show you is when we first started Defence Connect, and Defence Connect is our sort of internal Facebook type LinkedIn. So it's only for military personnel, but we can conduct a lot of business on there. So we went from never using it as a regiment all the way through to now, even to this day, we use it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And it allows us to get information out to the soldiers. straight away. It allows information to flow back to us in key appointments straight away. And so what does this have to do with leadership? It's how we implemented it, and we led from the front, because I think a key tenet of leadership very much is leading from the front. And so when we were looking at trialing this particular platform, we made sure we were using it. Everyone in key appointments, anyone in any leadership appointments, were encouraged to use it for all communications. And so what we did is we started to bring down all the other methods of communication. We started to slowly close those down so that this was the main method of communication. But it's really important that as leaders, we buy into that strategy. So it was the commanding officer who wanted this to be the primary communications use. And so everyone from him all the way down, that's we all bought into that idea. And then what happened was we were the second most engaged regiment within the entire army, which as a reserve unit is actually a massive achievement. So move on to the next slide, please. So a bit more on the how. I think it's very much understanding and valuing your people. You'll hear that a lot in terms of leadership. Leadership very much is looking at the strengths and weaknesses of your team and ensuring that everyone plays to their strengths more so than their weakness. You know, fundamentally, as a leader, you need to understand your people and always strive to better yourself and the team. Utilising the networks, either in business or outside, are essential to pass on good practice and ensure any mistakes aren't made again. And likewise, excuse me, as I've mentioned, mentoring is a great way to pass on this information and bring mentees up to the levels that you are at as a mentor. But I think it's also important that as a mentor, you can also learn off mentees. It's not a one-way street. You know, every day is a learning day, as we say. How we do that within the military, we do individual motivational factors, we do feedback, we do climate assessments. You'll have your own methods of doing these within your industries and your organisations. But I think it's very important to be able to have a bit of self-analysis and be able to look at yourself and see where you have scope to improve as a leader. Because, as I've said, leadership is all about adapting the way you are to ensure that you're always inspirational, and that's going to change as per the people you have, the teams you have, the situations you're in. So I think it's very, very important that you have the ability to self-analyze and ensure that you are always being, you know, the best version of yourself that you can be. So once you have obviously you've analyzed the situation, you've looked at who you have available to you to implement it, the how, obviously, then this then goes on to implementing said strategy, and that's where leadership is key for the different things that I've mentioned there. Leading from the front, ensuring that you're always buying into that one common goal, whoever it is that's setting that strategy, whether it's the government strategic level or whether it's at the lowest level of a unit. Ensuring that everyone buys into that one strategy is key. So moving on to the next slide, please. That was just a quick run through of how we do business and hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour as to how we look at leadership within a recruitment area. But you can take a lot of the different skills and you can put them to pretty much any situation you have, so long as you follow that analysis strategy, which in the military we're known for in terms of, you know, critical thinking and thinking on our feet. And so the key kind of conclusions, takeaway, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what a great leader is, because there's so many different examples of great leaders. But what I will say, and what I've kind of picked up on through research, is leadership or great leaders are always defined by the situations they're in, more so than the characteristics they have. So the conclusion that I've sort of come to is good leadership's understanding your personnel and adapting to the situation. So understanding the what then allows you to analyse the who, the how, the when, etc. So having that time to analyse, whether it's a quick 5-minute analysis or a longer term project management of 5 months of analysis. Having that ability to stop and think allows you to then have a better output at the end. Leadership needs to be adaptive, as I've mentioned. And the last 2 points there, mentoring and networking, is absolutely crucial. And I think things like today are fantastic for bridging that gap between the military and the different industries that we have, because often the military are just seen as this organization, and we don't necessarily we're not necessarily in the same bracket as some of the great organizations out there, such as DHL. Well, we do logistics exactly the same manner as DHL and Pertemps, different organizations like that, and often we're not necessarily put in the same category. So it's great to open these lines of communication. But what I wanted to do was just really open it up to any questions that anyone may have. That was just a very short run through of things that I would consider are important to take forward as leaders. But I'm open to any questions that anyone may have. So yeah, over to you guys for any questions.
Thanks, Samantha. That's great. I don't know whether I'm terrible at this. Chris, you might have to help me out. Can anybody want to sort of pop their hand up, or virtually or in real life? Has anybody got any questions for Major Samantha? Can't see anybody, but this is me not being very quick and good at this. I do have a question, actually. I suppose I could kick off, and then people might have some, because I was busy scribbling some of the points, Major Samantha, as you were talking. It was really, really useful and interesting to see that take on things. You mentioned mentoring a couple of times, and as you know, we're sort of leading on a pilot program, I suppose, because it only got launched in March around mentoring 21 in 21. I mean, have you been mentored? What have you been mentored, or have you mentored? If you had a mentee, can you give a bit more information on that as to how your experience of it and what the benefits have been?
So I haven't personally been mentored, which is a shame, because having been a mentor now and have mentees to pass information on, it just highlights the gaps in knowledge and the changing nature of information. So often when you're at sort of senior level appointments, you're deemed to know the most amount of information at your level, when in reality it's perhaps the newer people that are coming in that have the more up-to-date information that you may not necessarily have kept abreast of. So for me, I would have benefited hugely from having a mentor, but unfortunately at that time it wasn't available. But now we've come on leaps and bounds, and mentoring programs within the military are not a new idea, and they're absolutely fantastic. I'm a massive advocate of them.
So have you got a mentee at the moment then? Do you mentor somebody?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different mentees in different areas of responsibilities that I have. Yeah. And
is there, and sorry, apologies everybody that I'm taking the floor, but really interested in this subject, obviously, because of what we're here for today, in terms of, is there a gut feel of how you do that? Is there a program that you follow? How do you, obviously we're talking about leadership and adapting the style of leadership. I assume you adapt your mentoring depending on the mentee that you've got, but is that sort of a gut feel, or is that something that there's some thoughts from your leaders of how to run that program? How does that work?
So yeah, there are formal mentorships out there, but for me, because I have a few different mentees that are in different areas of the business effectively, it's easier for me to just adapt to each of their needs. So it's more of a one-to-one instead of just a one-size-fits-all. And I think that just links back to the whole leadership and being able to adapt your type of leadership, and that way you're getting the best out of them, and they're actually getting something out of it. If you try and pigeonhole it into one type of system, it's not always going to be effective, in my opinion.
That's great, thank you. I have got a question on chat, but before I go to that, is there anybody that wants to wave at me, or is there any questions from the floor? Oh, Ben, I can see you popping your hand up, and it's lovely to see a chat. I should have said that. Although we're women in business, we're very inclusive, and this is all, it's open to men as well. So Ben, it's lovely to see you.
Hi everyone, yeah, thanks very much. To be honest, I didn't know it was a woman in. It didn't say that on any of the information when I signed up, so not to worry. But first of all, I'd like to thank Major Samantha for her service to the country. It is appreciated. But also, you're saying with recruitment, you guys are trying to recruit. What age group do you recruit from and to in the reserves?
Okay, so we recruit from 18 all the way up to 55. But obviously, when we're looking at a recruitment strategy, we have different drives for different areas and different ethnicities, backgrounds, sexes. We depending on the trade that we're trying to recruit for. But the overarching age is 18 to 55.
Thank you. So who are you trying to recruit for at the moment? Is there a specific job or role or experience that you're looking for that would help? Are you looking for management like the people on this webinar, or are you looking for junior ranks as such?
So yeah, as I've mentioned there, one of our gaps is at the second lieutenant, captain level, and that's kind of the middle management of officers. And that's something that as business, as industry people, you could definitely come in and offer some expertise. We do recruitment straight in through Sandhurst, so you would effectively come in and do your training and leave as an officer within the regiment. And I think it's really key, because irrespective of what regiment you join in terms of logistics, whether it's chefs, whether it's drivers, the ability to take the skills that you have in business and move them into an army atmosphere would be fantastic. And a lot of them are the same, because when you're talking about leadership, management, administration of personnel, with equipment, it is the same. And so yeah, we're always on the lookout for anyone who wishes to become an officer within the regiment, because we're very short on the ground.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, that's great.
I assume that you want to join?
I'll be honest, I'm a veteran. I did just shy of 5 years in the Queen's Royal Lancers with 2 tours of Iraq, so I'm a little bit too portly at the moment, but it's something that's triggered my thoughts at the moment. I don't know whether my wife and children would be keen, but something to think about, possibly discuss in the future. Yeah,
take my email and drop me a line, by all means.
Super.
That's brilliant, thank you. I have got a question from the chat. It says, have you had an experience with poor or bad leaders, Major Samantha, and what did you learn from that experience?
The honest answer is yes. I think we can all agree that we haven't got to the levels that we're at without experiencing some exceptionally good and unfortunately some exceptionally bad leadership. The takeaways that I've learned from that are just very much how I now adapt my leadership. So, for example, when I was a Lance Corporal, you would often be told to do things, and at that level, you were never really explained to what you were doing and why you were doing it, which made it quite difficult. And there was no common purpose, there's no common goal, everyone just moaned a lot. So now as a leader, if I'm ever given out a task that perhaps is a little bit mundane or a little bit nugatory, I make sure I explain to the guys why they're doing it and give them that bigger picture. So that's just one example of bad leadership that I've seen and experienced firsthand, and how I've tried to now take that forward and not make the same mistakes as a leader myself.
And so how would you describe your leadership style, which is a really difficult question, I know. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. If somebody asked me, I'd be like, oh, crikey. But have you I suppose, as you talked about in your presentation around that self-analysis, which I think is really tricky to do, isn't it? So have you gone through that? What do you think your leadership style is? How would you describe yourself as a leader? So
I think as a leader, the style that I would probably most use is the laissez-faire approach, and that's because I've been I've been on the other side of an autocratic one, and democratic doesn't always work, because then there's too many opinions. So, you know, I'd like to think I'm firm but fair. I'm the kind of approachable leader that if someone else has a better way of doing something, they can come to me and we can have a dialogue about it. But ultimately, I'm the one that's culpable. I'm the one
Oh, somebody popped themselves on mute. Sorry.
So yeah, I suppose that would be my overarching leadership style. But as I've mentioned so many times, the situation absolutely changes. So out on operations, you know, perhaps I wouldn't be so laid back, and I would be a little bit more prescriptive in my organisation and my leadership style then, because of the severity of what happens if things go wrong.
Thank you. That's really reflective, and thank you for asking that pretty difficult question that I popped you on the spot. I promise, guys, I didn't feed that to Major Samantha before we got on the call. So, is there any other questions from the floor? I'm conscious I'm taking up all these questions. I'm finding it really useful. Is there anybody else that wants to wave at me? Oh, Simon, I can see you waving.
An observation. I wonder what the group thinks. Do you think that it's possible to have you need a different style of leadership in different industries? So if you're working in an all-in-out sales industry, you need a certain kind of leader. If you're working in education, you need a certain kind of leader. Or do you think there's certain traits that, I mean, I personally think there are certain traits that you can pull together to make a good leader, but do you think that you perhaps get different kind of leaders in different industries, and it's important to have that as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think it just comes back to the whole changing and adapting to the situation, because a leader within the military is going to be very different to leadership of a school or university. I've purposefully in my presentation left out the links between women and leadership, because as per my article, when I looked at it, there's not very many female leaders that are well known necessarily, and I've posed a few questions within that article, which is a whole nother webinar, I'm sure. But fundamentally, you're right, there are qualities that you can attribute to a good leader, you know, those being, you know, the inspiration, the motivational, communication skills, you know, you have to have communication skills, etc. But I've deliberately stayed away from the female side, because I think fundamentally, so long as you have those core skills and you learn to hone them in different situations, I think anyone can be a good leader.
Brilliant, thank you.
That leads on to a question from Catherine I've got on the chat here. Are there any public figures who you think are good leaders, you know, that display good leadership?
I mean, yeah, there's loads of different leaders that you can reel off, a lot in the military context, you know, Winston Churchill, Field Marshal Slim, and controversially, you know, Adolf Hitler. When you look at the definition of leadership in terms of inspiring motivation, you know, he definitely did that. Not saying he's a good leader by any stretch of the imagination, he certainly wasn't. But in terms of anyone that I look up to personally, I don't really look up to anyone externally, because I just find that the media perhaps may skew public opinion of them. So for me, I take my leadership from people that I've seen in action. When I was in Afghanistan, I had an exceptional commanding officer, and the way he engaged with people, the way he spoke, it made me it gave me inspiration. And I thought, okay, so if he can do it, what is it that he's doing that I can take away and perhaps do that in future? So yeah, there's a whole load of different leaders out there, and each and every one of them will have different qualities that individuals can resonate with. But for me personally, I like to keep it a little bit closer to home for people that I've actually worked with or worked for.
Yeah, that's really insightful, certainly. Is there any other questions? I've got another one myself. They keep on coming from me, but does anybody else want to wave at me? or put up anything in the chat. I think you mentioned, which is certainly how I seem to operate as well. It's about, you know, working with those leaders, people that lead and manage myself, you know, and I really find that inspirational. And I hope people that work for me and with me find me, you know, some of my style. And I'm interested in how you, Samantha, help develop future leaders. You know, is that something that you're consciously doing? Is it led by themselves and them asking you questions? How do you go about developing future leaders and sort of seeing that ambition across perhaps more junior members of staff and helping them to develop?
So, as I mentioned previously, we have a quite comprehensive leadership programme which culminates at the Military Academy Sandhurst. So there's a few different routes that you can take in order to get there, and that's within the regular or reserve army as well, which then depends on what you have to do beforehand. But in terms of how do you get somebody to that standard, it definitely is a two-way street. There needs to be a buy-in from the individual, definitely, because you can't do the work for them. They have to be receptive to the information you're giving them. We have different leadership packages that as soon as someone's identified as a potential officer, we have different packages that they can go on to learn the different sort of critical analysis, communication, written skills, etc. But ultimately they go to Westbury and they are assessed against a whole host of competencies. If they're successful, they then go to Sandhurst where their leadership skills are honed. At my level, realistically, I'd probably just offer advice and guidance as to how my career progression was and what I did and what I learned to prepare myself for that system, because it's the same system that everyone would use. So that's what I would do. But as I said, there are other programs within the military that offer a lot more of a comprehensive training program.
So in a way, you know, and I think Ben picked up on it, and some of our other speakers as well, and Simon, in terms of other industries and other sectors that might not have those sort of formal structures and programs in place. It's how we can sort of learn from you and learn from some of those structures and adopt it. And, you know, in some very small businesses, you know, in SMEs that have got you know, fewer members of staff, but have got some junior members of staff that have really got something about them and want to develop on that path within that industry and then moving on. It's how we as leaders promote that, really. And do you think a big thing is confidence? I mean, you know, is that something that you talk about and that you try and instill? Yeah, definitely. To be a leader, you definitely have to have an element of confidence and a whole host of other qualities. If I would have applied for a commission at 18 when I first joined the army, I don't think I'd have been successful. I was only successful after the exposure that I'd had in the military police, and yeah, definitely my confidence had grown. But it's interesting what you said there, because I think within businesses and industries there's an idea that you have to have the subject matter expertise in order to lead, and therefore the only way to get to those management levels or leadership levels is to go through the ranks effectively. But what's great to see is a lot of industries now are opening it up. So the police, for example, you can now join as an inspector and do a direct entry, which it still gives you the same information and qualifications, but it acknowledges that some people perhaps have those other skills and attributes that are just as important, if not more important, than having the prerequisite knowledge of policing, for example. So it's really great to see that, because I think there's an idea sometimes that people are lost along the way, where they are stuck in jobs that they perhaps could offer so much more and have so much more potential, but they're stuck there until they've done effectively their time served. So it's great to see that industries and businesses are starting to adopt that strategy. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to wave at me or pop something on the chat? No, if something might come to somebody though. Oh, I've got something here. No, I think so. There's nothing else for me, as I say, because I'm quite conscious I've taken the floor, Major Samantha, and I'm sure over a cup of tea I could ask you lots more questions. I really find it fascinating, and that's been great. But I want to hand over to Simon, just to give us a brief update on the armed forces. And if we've got any time after that, if anybody has any burning questions, please pop it on the chat. But if I could hand over to Simon briefly, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, I was talking away and I'm still on mute.
Oh, no, don't worry. We're still getting used to this world, aren't we? But we can see your slides, so thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Chambers for having us here today. Today I'm going to do a very short presentation on the Armed Forces Covenant, and it's something that I have mentioned to you and mentioned in these talks and in our interactions with the 21 in 21 group, but I just want to put a little bit more meat on the bones for us to speak today. Next slide, please. So as I say, my name is Simon Butt, and I have the engagement team for the West Midlands Reserve Forces and Cadets Association. And I do know it's a bit of a mouthful. So next slide, please. So the Covenant itself, basically the Covenant is a promise from the nation that those who serve or have served in the armed forces, that both them and their families are treated fairly and not disadvantaged in their day-to-day lives. You might ask, well, how is that feasible? Why would people do it? I think it could happen inadvertently. I have mentioned that I worked in finance in a previous lifetime, and we very rarely approved mortgages for military personnel. They simply didn't build up enough credit score, especially if they were mobilized across the world. However, through working with employers and through the Covenant, we now have financial organisations that will look at each applicant on a case-by-case basis. So as long as there's no adverse financial history recorded against an individual or a military personnel, they will look at giving you a mortgage. So it's not as strict as it used to be. We also now have employers or housing associations that give a percentage of their allocated housing stock to veterans once they leave the forces. So that is a result of our working with them through the Armed Forces Covenant. Next slide, please. So who are these individuals that we actually are looking to support? These are people from across the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and they're made up of people, regulars. They are made up of members of the reserve forces. So those are individuals that hold jobs in the civilian world, but are part of the defence infrastructure as well. Of veterans, including regulars and reservists, and those are wounded, injured, sick and sick. And cadet force adult volunteers. Now, these are individuals that provide a crucial function to the whole cadet piece. They're not only ensure through their work with the cadets that they are helping to shape the next generation of citizens, but also help to impart those key essential soft skills that employers value in the future of workforce, such as ownership of tasks, leadership, and good timekeeping and good interpersonal skills as well. And finally, not to forget spouses and partners of all the above. Next slide, please. This is a copy of the Armed Forces Covenant, and it's a document that many of our employers will sign to show their support. Section 2.1, which is the main bit that employers look at. These, we have 2 regional employer engagement directors, and they will work with community organisations and employers who want to show their support by helping you tailor the pledges so you're able to deliver them and show your support in a way that's relevant to yourselves. Next slide, please. So why is the Covenant important? Well, to us it's important because it helps us look after people. It helps us look after those individuals that have made sacrifices and served their nation. And on the back of that, it helps successful transition from the armed forces into the civilian workforce. So we have employers that will give guaranteed interview schemes. And once they will employ a veteran, will be very understanding and put schemes in place to support them as well. Military families, we often find that spouses will can travel around with their military partner, and they will often have key skills that are vital in the workforce as well. So we have some employers that have develop short-term contracts for military spouses so that they're allowed to contribute to the workforce as well and to wider industry. And not forgetting the reserves and cadets. So if there is a supportive employer who is willing to demonstrate in the Armed Forces Covenant their support for the reserves and cadet force volunteers, those individuals are more likely to stay in the reserves and cadet force, and it will help them see that their employer values what they do as well. Help us to ultimately grow those two elements. Next slide, please. And what does the covenant mean for yourself as a business? So firstly, any organisation that wishes to show their support can contact myself and we can arrange to have a signing, an Armed Forces official signing with yourselves. Could you click on the next point, please, Chris? It allows yourselves to have a partnership with Defence and allows you to show all your support for the Armed Forces in a single document as well. And lastly, but definitely not least, it allows you to sort of like show your corporate responsibility, align your corporate social responsibility as well. Next slide. So you might say, okay, that's all well and good. That's fantastic. But what benefit is it to me as an organisation, as a business? Well, firstly, it gives you free access to military talent, which through funded recruitment agencies such as Careers Transition Partnership, Officers Association, and Forces Families Jobs. And we have veterans that are registered on these organisations, and they have a wealth of skill that they can provide within industry and to employers as well. Our reservists and cadet force adult volunteers, they are trained, they have opportunities to train with us on a variety of different subjects, and they will take this training back to yourselves as employers and be able to impart all that learning in your own workplaces benefiting you. We have military engagement teams that will go out and deliver things like leadership, development, strategic thinking, webinars and seminars and face-to-face conferences and training at your workplaces as well. And we don't charge for things like that. There's ample opportunities for networking. There's procurement opportunities as well to Defence. And there's a promotion of your business to the whole Armed Forces community once you've signed the Armed Forces Covenant. There's also an opportunity to gain recognition from the Ministry of Defence through something called the Employer Recognition Scheme, which I will talk a little bit more about later. And there's an opportunity to kind of be part of something called the menu of benefits, where we reward those who work with us. Some of the things we offer is having residential weekends with certain military units, taking our employers to the Queen's birthday parade or trooping of the colours, taking our employers to the Cosford Air Show, and kind of and the things like the regional employer engagement group that we hold as well. So where we hear the views of our employers, our military personnel get to hear the views of our employers as well, and it's a mutual consultation kind of group. So all in all, there's a lot to gain by working with Defence. Next slide, please. So the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme that I spoke about earlier, just to give you a kind of indication of what it means for our region. So once you sign the Armed Forces Covenant, basically you're eligible for a Bronze Award. So as the Chambers will know, once you've signed it, a certificate is, once you apply for the certificate, it's sent across to you, and thereby you can use our logo on your website and on your letterhead and things like that. And it basically says that this employer is supportive of Defence. And in the region, we currently have 465 employers in the West Midland region that are supportive, that have that certificate. Silver and gold, they are slightly higher, of a slightly higher standard, and we have 112 silver award holders in the region. We hold a regional ceremony every year, as does every single region in the UK, to honour our silver award holders. And basically, in order to qualify that, you have to have supportive HR policy in place for reservists and military personnel that you employ, as well as, I mean, even if you don't employ them, you can still put one in place in the event that you ever do. And you generally need to be working towards the pledges that you've committed to. And as I said, we've got 112 of those employees within the region. And then gold, which is like the creme de la creme, should I say. And that's for employers. So that's when employers are not only doing all the things I mentioned above, but actually advocating support to their networks and to their colleagues for defence. And we currently, in the region, we have 32 gold award holders. So that it gives you some kind of indication of how we recognise and reward your support as well, because it's an additional task to what we would normally ask. But we have regional employer engagement directors that would work with you on your journey to help you take that process further. Next slide, please. And the next step, I suppose this is the call to action asked from us really, is for you as organisations to consider whether this is something that you'd be interested to do, to show your, i.e. to show your support for defence, and let me know, get in touch with me and let me know if you need any more advice and help, and if we can get somebody out to talk to you about how we can manifest that. Brilliant. Next slide, please. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, any queries, please just ask away or email me directly. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. That was so useful. And I know that we've had a number of conversations and we've had some meetings together actually, but today I really got more and more information about what that covenant includes. And I know you work very closely with Chris and Matt, but gosh, the breadth of work that you do and the breadth of the benefit and the value that you can provide to businesses that take up that offering is very significant. So I know, as I say, the Chamber is a valued and proud signatory. So and as I say, I know that it's Armed Forces Week next week, so it's going to be a busy week for you, Simon, is it? Yeah, so have a good rest this weekend before next week. But as I say, anybody that wants any more information, you can come through the Chamber and we can pass that to Simon. So if anybody wants any more information, has anybody got any questions? Don't think there are, unless anybody's waving to me.
Hi, sorry, I've got a question.
Oh,
hello.
Please do.
Hi.
Yeah.
First, I just want to say to Major Samantha Lucas, thank you so much for your service and what you do, and what you've talked about today has really shed some light on your experiences, but how I can kind of bring things on as well. So thank you for that. In terms of, Simon, what you mentioned, is there like a joining fee for working with you on the covenant? Are there any fees that are involved? If you could explain, please.
There's absolutely no fees involved in working with us. As I say, I mentioned earlier that we have military engagement teams that will go out and deliver presentations and on leadership and development, both to employers and also working with community groups or youth groups as well. And we don't charge for things like that at all. So if you were interested in signing up to the Armed Forces Covenant, there's absolutely no charge.
That's brilliant. It is definitely something that's quite interesting and something that I would like to continue discussing with you. So I will definitely get in touch with you.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. We can also help facilitate that introduction because we've got, you know, details. And Simon, are we able to send your slides out after today, because that's got your details on as well, hasn't it?
Of course, yeah, it's not a problem.
We can sort that out to send out your slides. So is there anybody else that's got any questions or thoughts? Any closing points? No. I tell you what, we did that very well, guys. 11:57. We ran that like a tight ship. That's the event today. Thank you so much to Major Samantha and Simon Butt as well for a really informative session. Thank you ever so much. Excuse me, as I say. This is one of many leadership, women in business workshops and events that we're going to be rolling out for our 21 in 21, both our mentors, our mentees, and our valued members. So please do look out. And yeah, if there's any thoughts or queries after today's session, please channel them through us at the Chamber, and we'll make sure Major Samantha or Simon get that information as well. So if anything comes to you later on, do be in touch. But thanks ever so much. I hope you have a lovely Thursday. and that not that I want rain, but it needs to maybe cool down slightly because it's very muggy and sticky here. But I hope you're all really well. Have a lovely rest of your day.